We are at Discovery Wildlife Park, just outside of Innisfail, Alberta. Come join us as we check out what animals they have to show us. We recently attended our local mini zoo here in central Alberta called Discovery Wildlife Park. While my kids had a total blast visiting the zoo, it did bring up some emotions and questions in me that I feel need to be discussed. Just how ethical are zoos? Before we begin, I really want to emphasize that this is not a video intended to bash or criticize Discovery Wildlife Park. From what we saw, it was a very well-maintained establishment. The animals looked healthy, the enclosures were clean, the trainers were very caring from what we saw, and it seemed like everyone had the best interests of the animals at heart. Discovery Wildlife Park is even used as a temporary holding zoo for animals from other zoos, such as this bear, who was being held temporarily at Discovery Wildlife Park while her enclosure was being renovated. Discovery Wildlife Park is a great family attraction and my children loved it.
The kids have found a turtle sticking its head out of this little bathtub.
I do intend to showcase the best of Discovery Wildlife Park as we go on. But I couldn't just make a video about the zoo all tra-la-la, happy times visiting the zoo, while when we were visiting, I was actually having a crisis of conscience. About 80% of me loved going to the zoo and seeing the animals up close, but there was about 20% of me that felt really guilty about it while doing so. This led me to do some research when we got home about zoos, trying to find the answer to the age-old question, just how ethical are zoos? And I'm not just talking about the zoo in Innisfail, Alberta, but really all zoos. And what I found through my research were points on either side of the coin. So we'll do a pro-con study here. First off, I'll list the biggest con for me and for most people on the internet when I was doing research. The size of the enclosures. Well, let's just call a spade, the size of the cages. These animals in zoos live in an extremely reduced habitat from what they would have in the wild. I mean, the enclosures at Discovery Wildlife Park were not tiny, they were actually fairly sizable considering it was a zoo. But when you look at how much space an animal would have in its natural habitat, a zoo enclosure is not comparable whatsoever. Watching these animals pace back and forth in front of the cages, wearing down tracks in the grass, makes me feel sad and depressed, and I feel really bad for these poor creatures all locked up. But then you do research on the other side of the coin, looking at an animal's natural habitat and how much of that has been depleted by human activity, and you find out large chunks of most animals' natural habitat and natural territory have been reduced significantly. I don't want to pull up percentages because when I looked, the percentages were different for every type of species, but I will say across the board, all species had had their natural territory depleted by human activity. Humans come in and cut down natural areas and then turn them into fields for farmland or strip malls or parking lots, reducing an animal's hunting and living territory, destroying food sources and breeding grounds. So are the animals in the wild much better off than the ones in the enclosures? For this one, I'd say most likely yes. No matter the size of the enclosure, living in the wild is probably always going to be much better. But that leads into my biggest pro for zoos, for at least me personally. As natural habitats for animals are reduced, they're forced to forage for food amongst humankind. Cattle and pets, farm animals, and roadkill alongside busy roads become the new food sources. Then, even though we as a society force these animals to adopt new techniques, become outraged that they're hunting our pets and our cattle, and so we start to hunt these animals ourselves. So then the question becomes, is it better to live free and roam wherever, but be hunted yourself, possibly starve, and have no safe place to live or raise your young? Or is it better to live in captivity, in a smaller enclosure, but be well fed, cared for, provided with medical attention? I honestly don't have the answer to that question. What I can say is this. Discovery Wildlife Park gave me no cause for concern to think that the animals were getting anything less than the best. These are just my own thoughts and anxieties over zoos in general. We saw a wide variety of animals when we visited Discovery Wildlife Park. Sleepy, spooning lions, dozing, happy bears, wolves, camels, and tiny exotic cats, just to name a few. My kids' favorite animals were the ostriches, mainly because they had a bit of a threatening aura and it thrilled my children. Ostriches can be nasty, they like to bite, and there was always that slim chance that they would shove their head through the cage and get really close to the kids. My favorite creature at Discovery Wildlife Park was the Siberian tiger. She was 17 years old, which is a ripe old age for a tiger. Their average lifespan is only about 15 years old. She was a saucy thing, and the trainers kept joking about her going into menopause. She put on a great show for us, when she felt like it, that is.
Discovery Wildlife Park is quite expansive. The cages, or the enclosures, I guess, are all nicely spaced out, so you end up doing a lot of walking. So they rent little golf carts for people to cruise around in. We didn't, we used our legs.
You could do just a self-guided tour around Discovery Wildlife Park, checking out all the animals, learning their names because they all have cute first little names. But you could also have a chance to get a little more in-depth with the animals. Discovery Wildlife Park offers bear shows where they teach you about the bears and then give you an opportunity to take photos with them. And the show that we stayed for was the cat show, where they choose one of the big cats to do a little presentation, and you get to learn about the treatment and care of the big cats. That's where we saw the Siberian tiger do all of her tricks.
What are your thoughts on zoos? Leave me a comment below. I know this is a controversial topic, but do your best to keep it conversational. If you like what you saw, remember to subscribe to my channel and ring that bell.